Delighted to be joined now by Rear Admiral Dr Chris Parry, CBE. He's a former Royal Navy commander, but I have an awful feeling, Chris, that there's going to be smoke coming out of your ears or steam coming out of your ears when you talk about this story today. Woke Navy chiefs want to rename one of our ships, submarines, HMS Agincourt, to avoid upsetting the French. It turns out that it being called HMS Agincourt after the 14-15 victory is upsetting the French, they think, and they want to change its name. What do you make of that, Dr Parry?
Well, there's no indication the French are upset. Even they're not that wet. This is basically an attempt to erase our history. I think probably the army at Agincourt wasn't diverse enough. That is the problem. And this is absolutely ridiculous. It won't be the Navy chiefs doing this. This will be political pressure from this regime that we have at the moment. Yeah. And it's ridiculous. I mean...
it's ridiculous that anyone even had a nanosecond's thought about this. The fact that it's actually gone through various memos and committees is mind-blowing. Do they not have anything better to do when we've got two wars ongoing right now?
No, I mean, you know, the French aren't going to rename the Gare Austerlitz because they might offend the Austro-Hungarians, are they? And what's next? Trafalgar Square? Waterloo?
Don't give them ideas, Chris, for the love of God. Seriously, it's the sort of thing. But this is the thing. It's the idea that, again, you have to whitewash the past because someone will be offended. You know, but, I mean, by the way, you know, yes, there were battles. We've been at war with France many occasions. We also rescued France from the Nazis, you know, in the 40s. You're welcome. I don't think we've got anything to be ashamed or embarrassed about in our past. Our past is our past. It is what it is. And this is all part of the taking down statues of someone who was related to someone who owned slave ships. And it's a very strange sort of Stalinist style year zero, you know, blocking people out, you know, out of photographs, pretending they never existed sort of policy, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, year zero starts on 4th of July last year, as far as Labour is concerned. I mean, you know, we have to understand that fighting forces rely on their traditions and to actually give you morale in combat and things like that. And if we start messing around with this sort of thing, then you're going to find we're going to deplete and degrade our armed forces. There's no question about that. The minute, I'm sure, you know, the Navy chiefs are as angry as I am about this, to tell you the truth. I mean, Achilles, oddly enough, of course, was killed by Paris in the Trojan Wars. So it's even worse.
Well, exactly. I mean, this is the extraordinary thing. That said, we did have, what was it, RAF chiefs, didn't we? Basically, it's recruiting and choosing pilots to be trained up as you know, jet fighter pilots. They were just, we know, can't have any more white, straight men. We need to have people of colour and trans and goodness knows what, women. I mean, the obsession, the very people you'd think should only be worrying about the bottom line and like, what are we a fit fighting force? Their obsession with wokery is terrifying. We've seen in America Donald Trump going, right, that's it, none of this nonsense. The government only recognises, you know, two genders because that's all there are, trying to get all of this stuff out of the military. Are you hopeful at all that this might happen here, whether under this government or any future government?
Well, Julia, I'm not allowed to lecture at the Defence Academy because I have views similar to Pete Hegseth about the need for a warrior class and to project a fighting culture. You know, I've been banned from actually speaking because because it upsets people.
Because you think that the military should be there as a fighting force and a defensive force and nothing else?
No, it should be there basically to deter our enemies, fight the Queen's enemies and promote our interests. That's what we're here for. We're not some sort of social experiment. I don't believe that the armed forces should reflect society. No. If we did, we'd end up with all the drug dealers and criminals as well. Yeah. You know, it has to reflect the best in society because we're playing at international level. Yeah. That's what I used to tell my sailors and Marines. You play at international level, you're as good as any England footballer and you've got to perform like that. Well, better than England footballers, let's face it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is extraordinary that anyone thinks anything different, isn't it? What do you make of Donald Trump's demands, again, repeat of the weekend, about Western allies in NATO paying more of their percentage of their GDP on defence? Because a lot of concern that, you know, We're not even going to be looking at, in this country, raising our spending from, 2.3% up to even 2.5%, let alone the 3% or the 5% that Donald Trump has thrown out, even though America doesn't spend that much of its GDP as a percentage of its GDP. That may not even happen until 2032. That is a couple of election cycles away. Do we need to be spending more money now? Is Donald Trump right? And is it about how much we spend, or is it about what we spend it on?
Yeah, that's the critical point, Julia. It's not how much we spend, it's what we spend it on. Now, we are facing a clear and present danger from strategic enemies right now: China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And if we spend money today, it won't have any effect for a number of years yet. Now, you're absolutely right. It's not what you spend, but bear in mind, during the Cold War, we spent 5.2% of GDP on defence. Yeah. It's less than 2% at the moment. If you want to get Europe up to the same level of combating Russia without the Americans, it takes about 500 billion euros. Ouch. And that's what the EU has said that they need to spend, but they want to actually finance that with debt. And they've proposed that to our government. It's absolutely ludicrous. We are transmitting to our enemies that they can do exactly what they want around the world, and frankly, we don't mind. The first duty of government is to defend this country and its interests, and yet, as Sam said just now, we spend over 20% on welfare and the NHS, less than 10% on defence.
And especially in such a dangerous and difficult world with the terrorism threat, Russia, China and elsewhere, that we should be taking this seriously, because if and when we do end up in a conflict situation, we're going to have to spend a hell of a lot more. It's going to cost an awful lot more. We're not going to be prepared for it. But we seem to be just sort of blithely gliding through, because spending a lot of money on the military isn't very popular. People will also say, well, that's X number of nurses, and we may not end up needing that particular aircraft carrier. But when you need it, you need it.
Yeah, and also, if you don't get your defence right, Julia, you don't get to make choices about nurses, schools, hospitals and the rest. Ask the Ukrainians about that.
Very, very good point. Always so good to talk to you. Rear Admiral Dr Chris Parry, CBE, former Royal Navy Commander. Thank you for that. Sam Armstrong listening to that. Look, there's a trade-off. Governments have to make choices. To govern is to choose. And if you spend money on, billions more on defence, that's billions you don't have to spend on the NHS or paying off some debt. That is an issue. But do you think that actually defence needs to be a much higher priority?
Yes, I do, and I'll tell you for why. Because I think the world is getting dramatically more dangerous, and it's getting more dangerous quickly. You only have to look at the events over the last few years to realise that assumption we made after the Cold War, that the end of history was here, that everything was peaceful, is mad, and it's for the birds. And we are seeing a time of history in which your capacity to get stuff done, your capacity to deliver for your own country, is directly related to the extent of which you can force what you want to go through. Yep. Donald Trump has just proved that, right? Yeah. So we should be investing in this, because
even down to the ceasefire deal, which would not have happened without the knowledge that Trump was coming in, working behind the scenes with the Biden administration, and that threat, all hell's going to break loose unless you return
Hamas
hostages.
did that deal for one reason, because they worried about American bombs getting dropped upon them.
End of. Yeah, absolutely.